I never thought a simple Craigslist ad could turn into the worst experience of my life. My name is Mark, and I'm 32. This happened 3 years ago, but it's still fresh in my mind like it was yesterday. I had just moved into a new apartment in a small town outside Denver. I didn't have much furniture, so I turned to Craigslist. I found a listing for a free couch that looked decent in the pictures. The description said, "In good condition. First come, first serve. Must pick up." It was listed by someone named Jeff, and the address was only about 15 minutes away. When I got to the house, it looked off. It was in a quiet, rundown neighborhood, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. The curtains were drawn tightly, and there was an old, rusted truck in the driveway. But I shrugged it off. Free is free, right? I knocked on the door, and after a long minute, a man answered. He was in his late 40s, with unkempt hair and a greasy t-shirt. "You here for the couch?" he asked in a flat tone. I nodded, feeling a little uneasy but not wanting to be rude. He led me to the garage without saying another word. The couch was there, just like in the pictures. It looked fine, no stains, no tears, but the air in the garage was heavy, like it hadn't been opened in years. As I started inspecting the couch, Jeff stood there silently, watching me. His stare was unnerving. "You live alone?" he suddenly asked. The question caught me off guard. I hesitated before answering, no. With roommates. It was a lie, but something about him made me not want to reveal too much. He grunted, then said, "You're gonna need help loading it." I didn't want him in my car, but I also couldn't lift the couch by myself. Reluctantly, I agreed. As we were moving the couch toward my truck, he muttered something under his breath. I couldn't make it out, so I asked, "What did you say?" He froze and looked at me with a strange smile. "Nothing. Just thinking how lucky you are." We loaded the couch, and I got out of there as fast as I could. But the weirdness didn't end. When I got home and started cleaning the couch, I noticed a faint, musty smell. As I lifted one of the cushions, I found something wedged in the corner, a small, crumpled piece of paper. It had a single word written on it in shaky handwriting, "Run." My stomach dropped. I immediately checked the rest of the couch and found something even worse. Inside the lining, there were scratch marks, like someone had been clawing from the inside. I panicked and called the police. They came, inspected the couch, and took it for evidence. I didn't hear back for weeks, but when I finally did, the officer told me something chilling. The couch had been stolen from a house where a woman had gone missing. Her body was never found, but there were signs she had been held captive in the house. Jeff, the man who gave me the couch, was arrested after they found bloodstains in his garage. To this day, I can't believe how close I was to, what? Becoming his next victim? I'll never know. All I know is that I'll never use Craigslist again. It was the fall of 2018. I was 26 and finally in a position to leave my cramped apartment in Chicago and find a house of my own. I had a decent job, some savings, and a dream of a quiet home in the suburbs. One evening, while browsing Craigslist, I found an ad that seemed perfect. Charming house for rent, $650 per month, move in immediately. The picture showed a beautiful 2-story house surrounded by trees, a large backyard, and a porch swing. The price was shockingly low, but the ad promised that the owner just wanted a reliable tenant and was looking to move out of state quickly. The listing was signed by someone named Eli, with no phone number, just an email. I messaged him right away. Within minutes, he responded. "Hi there. The house is available and ready for move-in right away. I'm looking for a long-term tenant who will take care of the property. I can meet you at the house tomorrow if you're interested. Let me know." I was excited but still felt a little wary, given the ridiculously low rent. However, the photos looked legitimate, and I was desperate to move out of my tiny apartment. The next day, I drove to the house. The place was exactly as it looked in the pictures, perfectly peaceful and idyllic. The house sat on a large plot of land at the edge of a small town, away from the hustle and bustle. There was a quiet charm to the place, and for a moment, I thought I had found my dream home. When I rang the doorbell, Eli answered. He was in his mid-40s, tall, with a neat but tired appearance. "You must be James," he said, shaking my hand. "Come on in. I'll show you around." He led me through the house, pointing out the large rooms, the spacious kitchen, and the beautiful fireplace in the living room. It felt too good to be true. The house was perfect, well-maintained and cozy. I couldn't believe the price. I asked him why he was renting it out for so little. Eli hesitated for a moment, his eyes flickering. "I'm moving out of state for work, and I just want to find someone reliable. The house has been in my family for years, and I want it to go to someone who will care for it." His story seemed reasonable enough. I was still skeptical, but the house felt so right that I decided to take the plunge. "I'll take it," I said, eager to secure it. Eli smiled. "Great. The paperwork is simple. I just need a deposit and the first month's rent, and we can get you settled in." We agreed on the terms, and after signing the lease, I gave him the deposit and rent money. He handed me the keys, gave me a final tour of the house, and said, "I'll be leaving tomorrow. You can move in whenever you're ready." That night, I started moving in. It was peaceful, quiet, and perfect. Too perfect. But as I unpacked, I noticed something strange. The walls felt too clean, too freshly painted, as if they were hiding something. The mirrors around the house reflected the rooms at odd angles. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something felt off. The first real sign of trouble happened on the second night. I was unpacking in the living room when the lights began to flicker. At first, I thought it was just bad wiring, but then I saw it, a faint shadow moving along the wall, even though nothing was there to cast it. I turned off the lights, hoping it was just my imagination, but the shadow remained. It darted across the walls, moving unnaturally, as if alive. My chest tightened. I locked myself in my room that night, leaving the lights on. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it was just stress. But things only got worse. That afternoon, I heard whispering. It wasn't coming from outside or the neighbors, it was inside the house. The whispers seemed to echo through the walls, low and unintelligible, like someone muttering just out of earshot. I pressed my ear against the walls, but I couldn't make out any words. By the third night, I was too terrified to sleep. I stayed in the living room with a flashlight, trying to stay alert. Around midnight, I noticed the mirrors again. They weren't just reflecting the room, I could see faint handprints on the glass, as if someone was pressing against the other side. My breath caught as the handprints started to move, dragging downward and leaving streaks across the surface. I grabbed a blanket and threw it over the mirror, trembling. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to leave the next morning. But the house had other plans. Around 3 a.m., I heard the most chilling sound yet, scratching. It started faintly, like nails scraping against wood, but soon grew louder and more frantic. It was coming from inside the walls. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal. The scratching grew closer, now accompanied by a low growl, guttural and inhuman. I backed into the corner of the room, clutching a heavy flashlight like a weapon. Then, the lights went out completely. I could hear the whispers again, louder this time, almost mocking. The shadow on the wall returned, twisting and contorting unnaturally. In a blind panic, I ran out of the house. I didn't even bother to grab my things. I drove straight back to Chicago, not stopping until I reached the safety of my apartment. The next day, I tried to call Eli, but his number was disconnected. The Craigslist ad had been taken down. When I tried to research the house, I found nothing, no records of its ownership, no history, no mention of anyone named Eli. To this day, I don't know what I experienced in that house. The whispers, the shadows, the scratching in the walls, it all felt like something out of a nightmare. Some places aren't meant to be lived in, and that house? It wasn't just empty. It was waiting. My name is Aaron, I'm 32 years old, and I live in Denver. A few months ago, I came across an unusual Craigslist ad that I still can't forget. It was a job posting in the gigs section, with a cryptic message, help needed for a simple task, great pay. No questions asked. Text 555XXXX. I'd been struggling to find stable work after being laid off, and the ad seemed like an opportunity to get back on my feet. The promise of good pay was hard to ignore, so I decided to reach out. I shot off a text, asking for more details, and within minutes, I received a reply from a man named Tom. He didn't say much at first but offered $500 in cash for a task that would only take a couple of hours. I hesitated, but the money was tempting. Tom told me to meet him at a storage unit facility on the edge of town. The place was isolated, with barely any cars parked outside. When I arrived, I saw a small, frail man standing near the entrance. He looked no older than 75, hunched over with a cane. His thin, white hair fell in clumps around his face, and his skin had a pale, almost ashen quality to it. His eyes were deeply sunken, and when he looked at me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something inhuman about his gaze. He greeted me with a quiet, raspy voice. "You're here for the job, then?" he asked, his eyes never leaving mine. I nodded, trying to ignore the chill that ran down my spine. He led me inside, walking slower than expected for someone who seemed so frail. The storage facility was dimly lit, the flickering fluorescent lights casting long, eerie shadows across the narrow halls. We reached the back of the building where the storage units were located. Tom moved with surprising speed and agility for his age, his cane tapping sharply against the concrete floor. He stopped in front of a unit, unlocking it with a key that seemed far too large for someone with his small hands. When the door opened, I was hit with a musty, metallic smell. Inside was a large wooden crate, covered in thick layers of dust. I raised an eyebrow. "This is it?" I asked. Tom didn't answer at first. He stepped inside, carefully moving toward the crate, his eyes glinting with an unsettling intensity. There was something in the air that made my heart race, like an unspoken warning. I felt compelled to follow him. He finally spoke, his voice now low and almost whispering. "You need to open it. I can't touch it anymore." He handed me a crowbar and stepped back, his eyes locked on the crate as though it held something far more dangerous than I could comprehend. I hesitated, but he stared at me so intensely that I couldn't back out now. I gripped the crowbar and began to pry open the lid. As it creaked open, the smell inside intensified, an odd, sour odor mixed with something rotten, something decayed. My stomach churned, and I felt an instinctive need to pull away. But I couldn't stop. Inside the crate was a black, tar-like substance, thick and oozing. It shifted as if alive, almost like a mass of writhing tendrils, but nothing in the crate could possibly move. My body froze, and for a split second, I felt a presence behind me, something dark and suffocating. I spun around, but Tom was gone. The lights flickered violently and went out, leaving me in complete darkness. Panic rose in my chest, and I could barely breathe. I fumbled for my phone, the screen offering the only light. When the glow illuminated the room, I saw Tom again, standing just a few feet away, his face twisted into a grotesque grin. His eyes were now wide open, unnaturally so, as if they were about to burst from his face. He was grinning in a way that seemed far too wide for his small, wrinkled mouth. "You shouldn't have opened it," he croaked, his voice distorted, low and inhuman. "It's not meant for you." The floor beneath me began to tremble, and I felt the air grow thick, heavy, suffocating. The tar in the crate began to bubble, and an awful, distorted sound filled the room. It was as though something was moving within it, something ancient, something beyond my understanding. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and ran, but the hallway stretched unnaturally, the walls closing in on me. I could hear Tom's slow, methodical footsteps behind me, but when I glanced back, he wasn't there. His voice echoed in the dark, "You opened it. Now you can never leave." I didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping for air, my chest tight with terror. I jumped in my car, slamming the door behind me. The last thing I saw before speeding away was Tom standing in the doorway of the storage facility, his twisted grin still plastered on his face, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. I never went back to that storage unit. I don't even know what was in that crate, but I do know that I'm not the same person I was before. The nightmares started shortly after, with the same twisted face of Tom, always in the background, his eyes watching me, waiting. And no matter where I go, I can never shake the feeling that whatever was in that crate is still out there, following me, patiently waiting for the day I'll open it again. I haven't told anyone about what happened. Who would believe me? But I know what I saw, and I can't forget it. Some things are better left undisturbed. And sometimes, the price of curiosity is more than you can ever pay.